Well, have to remember that the black people had gone through 200 years of slavery and 100 years of oppression following the Civil War, and the relationship between black people and the police is very special because black people saw the police, and to this day many of them see the police as the oppressors, as the enforcers of the white.
Action you can engage in that will not be on CNN and YouTube tomorrow morning. You don't have to like it, you got to accept it. It's called reality. There's cameras and umpires everywhere.
In a modern liberal democracy, in our army, is we want to turn violence on and off like a faucet.
Now, you make the point that while killing may be an inherent taboo, it's something that can be learned.
The only way you make a frightened person react in a certain way is to drill it into them, to make it a conditioned response.
Shots fired! 321, we have shots fired. We have one suspect down.
I told him not to reach for it. I told him to get his hand out.
You told him to get his ID, sir, and his driver's license.
Can I see your license, please? Get out of the car! Get out of the car!
Why did you shoot me?
Well, you dove head first back into your car. Your seatbelt violation, sir.
Seatbelt? I just pulled it off right there at the corner to pull in the gas station.
Well, I got help come to you, okay? I got help come to you.
I'm sorry.
That number one concern is what? Begins with an L. Lawsuits, liability, lawyers, I'm going to get sued. There's only one way out. Know the law, know it well. Get every training opportunity you can. Don't be afraid of being sued. Everybody gets sued. Just a chance for overtime. Be afraid of being successfully sued.
We are interrupting this program to bring you breaking news this morning on the trial of Officer Edward Nero.
It appears that Judge Barry Williams has ruled that Officer Nero is not guilty on all 4 of the misdemeanor charges that he faced in connection with the arrest and subsequent death of Freddie Gray in police custody.
Today, a jury in Pennsylvania found a police officer not guilty of murder. She had shot an unarmed man in the back, a killing that was captured on video, which is difficult to watch.
There was anger on the streets of Pittsburgh last night after a jury acquitted a white former police officer who shot and killed an unarmed black teen as he fled a traffic stop. Hundreds of protesters voiced their outrage about the verdict and struggled to make sense of the controversial decision.
The verdict is in for the North Miami police officer who shot an unarmed caretaker. Jonathan Aleda acquitted.
A riot squad officer has been cleared of assaulting a millionaire property developer during an arrest. Today, a magistrate found Senior Constable Jared Mildenhall did what he was trained to do when he took down David Hamilton on a night out in the Rocks.
New overnight, a jury cleared these two Austin police officers. They were accused of excessive force.
KVSJ Wallace tells us about the case and the backhanded comments made about it coming from the president of Austin's police union.
On some strong words, the verdict came down around 11 last night after the jury had been deliberating for about 6 hours. Prosecutors argued officers Robert Paff and Donald Petritis used excessive force, then gave false information in the reports about what happened. The officers say Quentin Perkins was in a crowd at a shooting scene in February. The officers claimed he walked away from them and then they ordered him to the ground. The officer's body camera showed the man was on his knees with his hands up when one of them tased him. Perkins said he's not happy with the outcome.
The video clearly shows that, hey, I had my hands up, did everything I was supposed to do. I complied, and at the end of the day, man, justice was not served, I feel.
A jury finds a former Boynton Beach police officer not guilty of raping a woman following a traffic stop. Good evening, I'm Tiffany Kenny.
And I'm Felicia Rodriguez. Our Terry Parker is live at the courthouse in West Palm Beach, where the accuser was in tears after the verdict was read.
St. Paul jury finds a police officer not guilty of assaulting a suicidal girl in handcuffs.
This happened in December. It was caught on video from the police squad car. That video released to us following yesterday's acquittal. Kate Raditz is live in the newsroom with more of what went into a not guilty verdict, which surprised some, Kate.
Denver City police officer was found not guilty of animal cruelty charges. Jeffrey Bolger was accused of cutting the throat of a dog last June, and Bolger's lawyers say it was an act of mercy.
The Florida versus George Zimmerman verdict. We, the jury, find George Zimmerman not guilty. So say we all foreperson.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony.
Returned a verdict of not guilty. Thus, the defendants, Milam and Bryant, are free men in this community of Sumner, Mississippi.
How are you? Good. Reason I put George, your brake lights are out.
Sir, I have to tell you, I do have a firearm on me.
Don't reach for it then. Don't pull it out.
I'm not pulling it out.
Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out! I wasn't! Go on! Fuck! Oh, man, Fuck!
Too bad you're so opinionated.
Yeah, isn't it awful?
You're wrong.
Isn't it awful to have an
You're
opinion
wrong.
about a black man being killed at the hands
Oh, really?
of your
Now
client?
now you put the race issue into it, and there is no race issue here.
Really?
Well, I don't have to answer anything to you either, because you obviously don't know what you're talking about.
I'll tell you what I do know what I'm talking about.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to bed. Good
Really?
night.
Okay.
Do you realise that your whole performance here merely tells the world how disgusting, actually, even the people representing these police officers are?
Well, thank you for the compliment, because if
It wasn't a compliment.
If you, oh really, I thought it was. If you think I'm going to sit here and listen to your talk bad about my client, I'm not listening to that. If you would have told me that an hour ago when I did agree to stay up, I would have not agreed to. Good night. Happy birthday.
Boiled down to is he kept reaching
when Yanez gave 3 commands, don't reach, and he kept reaching. But told the officer he had a gun. It came down where the verdict was, I felt, the right verdict according to what the law states.
He's a known racist, he's a known homophobic, he's a known bigot. This is not the first time it's happened. He's been in the news several times, and I hope he's held accountable for what he's done. It's not okay, it's not acceptable.
Scurlock was peacefully protesting like everyone else when he saw a man with a gun.
Not being violent, there's not even that issue with this group. It's to be proven wrong, but they certainly have the right to speak their mind.
There's no justice, no peace.
Don Klein says after reviewing all the surveillance video and witnesses that he heard from, including the shooter, prosecutors all agreed it was self-defense. Now, the father of the victim says he doesn't want violence, but he does want something to happen in court. Cell phone and surveillance video show the altercation that leads to the death of 22-year-old James Scurlock late Saturday night. The shooter is identified as Jacob Gardner, the owner of the Hive and Gatsby bars. It shows a scuffle where Gardner's dad pushes a protester and is pushed back. Gardner backs up when approached and showed a gun when 2 people jumped on him. He fired 2 shots but didn't hit anyone, and then Scurlock jumped on his back. That's when Gardner said he was being choked and shot him once in the clavicle.
His version is that I felt that my life was in jeopardy, or at least I was in jeopardy of getting serious bodily injury, getting pummeled or getting choked out with this guy on top of me. And I asked the guy to get off me, and he wouldn't get off me.
Klein says he based the decision off the evidence in the case and not on emotions, which are still very high. Scurlock's father says they want a grand jury to look at the case if Klein won't charge Gardner with a crime.
I honestly feel that if Mr. Gardner's dad would have kept his hands to himself, the incident would have never happened in the beginning.
Prosecutors say Gardner did not have an active concealed carry permit, but he hasn't been charged with a crime. Klein thinks
they're difficult decisions, even if they might be unpopular decisions. But it's based on what the evidence is and what the law is, and that's what I hope people understand here.
Klein says a Facebook post by Gardner about a, quote, military-style fire watch before the protest was not enough to say he intended to kill Scurlock.
It's telling right here. Had we been your friends for years? Yes, sir. Sure. Had we worked more of them than anybody in this country? Yes, sir. Sure have. Right. They got along fine with the niggas. We never mistreated them. And there's no complaints. And they are all happy.
CBS News investigation reveals changes police departments across the country say they're making to confront possible racial bias. This Friday marks 5 years since the death of Michael Brown. The unarmed black teenager was shot by a white police officer who says Brown attacked him in Ferguson, Missouri. There were months of protests after Brown's death and the grand jury decision not to indict the officer involved. Outrage over similar incidents in other cities led to changes in police training. But is it working? Jeff Pegues begins our multi-part investigation into policing in America 5 years after Ferguson. Jeff, what did you learn?
Well, we reached out to more than 150 departments in big cities nationwide. At least 69% of them told us that they have added training that teaches officers how to manage unconscious biases that we all have, including race. More than half of those departments say that they've added bias training since Ferguson. But when we asked if it works, most say they don't have a way to measure success. Some officers even told us that it's made their jobs tougher. Implicit bias training, has it worked? You don't think it works?
These are current Mesa, Arizona police officers. They are both white. We agreed to hide their faces and alter their voices so that they can speak freely.
And you have to make a decision like that.
This is their department's implicit bias training.
So there's research that has documented implicit biases, and they've linked it to ethnicity and race as one.
They are taught how to recognize and minimize negative impacts that hidden biases can have on their jobs.
People are inclined to stereotype black individuals as more aggressive.
Reinforcing the minority of society that has that blanket opinion about Caucasian males. One of the first videos introducing that training was reaffirming that we wanted to be a minority.
All right, so what do you think the agenda is?
Reinforcing that the police are racist, but specifically the white male police are racist.
Of recent controversies over police shootings.
For being up. More people, y'all niggas been trying to something.
But you're not black. Remember, we only kill black people.
For the first
5 or 6 censuses is a lie.
Those monkeys from those African countries, damn them, they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes.
To our knowledge, these veteran officers have not been involved in the kinds of high-profile incidents that have divided the community and led to what they see as an overcorrection in new training.
Trying to change what we have done that has worked overwhelmingly effectively. It becomes an officer safety issue, causing officers to second-guess themselves, which is a complete change to when we first started.
Well, there have been some pretty high-profile incidents here.
Just sit down, bro. Sit down.
Robert Johnson getting knocked around. Gabriel Ramirez.
You need to stop flexing on me.
Officers squeezed his neck after he was handcuffed. Daniel Shaver on his knees begging for his life in a Mesa hotel room. Caught on video.
There's nothing that those officers did that was outside of the training that they had received.
That Robert Johnson video. Is that what you're taught to do?
We're taught to handle the situation.
Was that handling the situation, or was that excessive force?
That was handling the situation.
The officers involved in the Ramirez and Johnson cases were not charged with crimes. Officer Philip Brailsford was fired and charged with murdering Daniel Shaver, but was acquitted after a 6-week trial.
Put your hands on the car, I'm gonna shoot you in your head. You understand me?
Similar incidents across the country have prompted calls for police to change their approach. A CBS News survey of departments in America's largest cities reveals part of that response. 75% of departments who completed our survey told us that they changed their training after controversial use of force incidents. 90% of departments who say they have implicit bias training say it is required of all officers. But training methods vary. For example, Honolulu, Hawaii told us that they have 1 half-hour session a year. Raleigh, North Carolina told us that they do at least 8 hours per year.
I want our community to feel safe.
Despite what we heard from those Mesa officers, Chief Ramon Batista told us earlier this year that the new training is working.
I think evidenced by the fact that in the last 9 months, we've reduced use of force-related events by over 30%, points to the fact that we're making progress.
But there is no universal measure of success. Other city departments we surveyed, like New York, say reducing physical altercations between officers and the community doesn't necessarily mean implicit bias training is working.
They judged a book by its cover.
Departments in Hawaii, Oregon, Georgia, and Nebraska told us that they track bias complaints against officers to determine success. But about 59% of departments who responded to our follow-up questions say that they don't have a way to know if implicit bias training is working at all. These officers say some of the new training is just for show.
They start the video with saying, "We are not telling you to do this. We are here to present it."
At the beginning of the session, they say, "Don't do this, but you got to watch it."
Correct. It kills morale because to pay for this training, we had to give up something else, right? So instead of doing more firearms training, okay, now we've taken funds from there. So for the officers on the morale, they look at it like, you don't care about me and you don't care about the citizens. You care about putting on this little show.
Mesa PD denies that trainers there tell officers to ignore what they're teaching. As you heard, those officers believe claims of racism among law enforcement are overblown.
Police for Breonna Taylor's family are blasting a decision to list Taylor as a co-defendant in a draft plea deal for her ex-boyfriend. But tonight, the prosecutor says it was a mistake.
Attorney Sam Aguiar posted a photo on social media today of the deal to Jamarcus Glover, who's facing multiple counts of drug trafficking. Taylor was shot by police as they served a warrant as part of an investigation into Glover. In his Facebook post, Aguiar wrote, "Breonna Taylor is not a co-defendant in a criminal case. She's dead. A way to try and attack a woman she's not even here to defend herself." In a statement, Jefferson County Commonwealth's attorney Tom Wine says he ordered Taylor's name taken off the draft when he became aware of the issue. He called Aguiar's comments a, quote, false accusation.
Take a look. I have to leave for an emergency phone call.
I'm going to let Scott and Larry finish
Mr.
up.
President,
Larry's going to talk about
on Breonna Taylor, if I can.
So I'll be back. I will see you tomorrow.
Mr. President, if you can, just one more question on Breonna Taylor. We're at a time right now where Americans feel like we are on this carousel. Mr. President, just one more question, if I can, on Breonna Taylor. People are protesting in the streets. What is your message to them?
Today we had the heartbreaking report, the news breaking that justice was denied of Breonna Taylor and her family. Just think if it were your daughter, your sister, your cousin, your relative, your friend, who was murdered by the police, and there was the charging decision held no one accountable for her death. In June, the House passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act to bring accountability to our justice system. I call upon the Senate to vote upon it immediately. We owe it to Breonna Taylor, to George Floyd, for Philando Castile, and so many others. To so many others.
It was black middle class in many of those places today, which we don't have, unfortunately, and that's a reason for some of the deterioration in our inner cities now, because black middle class people have been able to move to the suburbs, and leadership people aren't there. But back then, it was great tension, and now a Supreme Court decision saying it's changing. You're going to be a full American, and leaders rising like Martin Luther King and others saying freedom, and now people wanted to get on with it. But the police were the ones who were saying, tomorrow, yes, everything can't change overnight. That was their job. They were, and whatever the elected officials decided, whatever the school principal decided, whatever an employer decided, whatever a union decided, if that generated protest or tension, who had to be there in the middle? The police. And there came a time in the 60s when police officers became very frustrated with this. Day after day, we're out there, people are blocking highways, blocking the traffic to protest something or another, and people are picketing in front of an office building. Some company official is calling and screaming, "Get them out of here, lock them up." And you're in the middle. People had a right to protest, a right to free speech. There were rules. You couldn't lock them all up. But many of these powerful people had their way until now, and as things began to change, the police were there to maintain order.